As I mentioned before, the Junos OS is based on the free BSD kernel. This gives Junos a very stable Unix-like operating environment. I mentioned that the Junos OS is a modular system. What we mean when we say that the Junos OS is a modular OS is that the functions of the control and forwarding planes are separated from each other in their own protected memory space or daemons. This is something that was really unheard of before Junos hit the market. Essentially, what this means is that one type of service failure cannot affect another. For instance, if there's a fatal error in SNMP services running on the device, it cannot cause failures in the routing or switching processes. You will not have a device rebooting itself or crashing over a single non-essential process failure. These services are software daemons that run on top of the base FreeSB. These services are software daemons that run on top of the base FreeBSD OS kernel, so a failure of one of these services will not necessarily interrupt the continual operation of the base OS on which the other processes operate. Now, when you begin working with Juniper equipment, you will inevitably come across a Juniper device labeled with the NetScreen insignia. You will mainly see this on some of Juniper's older firewalls. NetScreen or ScreenOS is another Juniper operating system that is different from the Junos OS. Juniper purchased a company called NetScreen back in 2004 and incorporated some of their products, including the ScreenOS. All of Juniper's ScreenOS products have been phased out and replaced with Junos OS devices. So if you're looking for a lab device to use as you work through this course, make sure you end up with a device that runs Junos and not ScreenOS, or you might wind up pretty confused. There are a variety of Juniper devices that run the Junos OS. The Junos OS runs Juniper's routing, switching, and security platforms. With Junos OS at the core of these platforms, Junos can provide consistency from end to end in a variety of network environments. So let's take a quick look at some individual platforms that compose the Junos OS product family and what some of those main features are. So first of all, let's look at Juniper's routing platforms. Here we have the MX Series 3D Universal Edge routers. This is Juniper's flagship edge routing platform for enterprise and service provider applications. The MX 2020 model will scale through 80 terabits per second of system capacity. If you ever work in a service provider environment, you are bound to see lots of these. Next, we have the T-Series core routers. These are IP MPLS core network routing platforms that scale from 320 gigabits per second to 1.6 terabits per second in a single chassis, and up to 25 terabits per second in a multi-chassis system. There are actually more of these routers installed around the world than any other core routing platform on or off the market from any manufacturer. Then we have the PTX series packet transport routers. These are what Juniper refers to as super core routers. They optimize MPLS and Ethernet in a way that allows for greater adaptability for critical core capabilities. These routers also boast an industry-leading energy efficiency rating. So, in other words, they're going to save you some money on your energy bill. And lastly, we have the ACX series universal access routers. These are temperature-hardened routers that come in a small form factor and deliver a high performance and are very easy to provision. So basically, these are used in a lot of environmentally rough conditions. These are Carrier Ethernet 2.0 compliant routers, and they offer a cost-effective solution at a low maintenance cost. Okay, let's move on to some switching platforms. First off, we have the EX series Ethernet switches. This is Juniper's all-around versatile switching platform with models suited for the converged enterprise, to branch offices, data centers, service providers, and more. The EX switching platform is a solid time-tested switching solution. The EX4500 specifically is a pretty common model, and its backplane speed goes up to 256 gigabits per second, a data rate of almost a terabyte per second of throughput, and a capacity of about 700 million packets per second. That's quite a bit. Then we have the QFX series switches. This is one of Juniper's newer product lines. These are high-performance, low-latency data center and cloud switches that can be used in a variety of ways, offering a lot of flexibility in constantly changing data center and enterprise environments. These are high-density switches, which means you have a lot of power and ports in a small form factor. These switches are designed to handle the most demanding data center and provider environments. These switches can be deployed as 10, 40, or 100 gigabit Ethernet for core access, backbone, and aggregation devices with virtual chassis fabric, multi-chassis lags, and Junos Fusion architectures. Now, keep in mind that some of these features I am talking about here are just to give you an idea of what these different platforms do and how they're used. A lot of these features are well beyond the scope of this course, and they're not going to be anything we're going to be getting into in any detail. I just want to give you a really good idea of what these different platforms do and what they're capable of, so just kind of keep that information in your back pocket. We're not going to get real deep into explaining a lot of these things, but later courses will. Next, we have the QFabric system. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, what's the difference between QFX switches and QFabric? Well, mainly the difference is that the QFabric system is not a device. QFabric is the industry-leading scalable Ethernet switching fabric. The QFabric system is composed of multiple components, or what are referred to as QFab devices, working together as a single switch. This allows for vastly scalable systems that improve application performance over the network with really low latency, and they support layer 2, 3, and fiber channel over Ethernet on what Juniper likes to refer to as a lossless architecture. This has become a very popular product in cloud computing environments. Alright, so those are the main switching platforms, but I have another one I want to show you real quick. This guy I think is pretty cool. This is the OCX1100, the Open Networking Switch. Juniper has done something really interesting here. They have combined the Junos OS, which is based upon the open source Unix kernel, with an open source hardware platform. Makes sense, right? Well, what you end up with is an Open Compute Project switch powered by the powerful Junos OS. This offers a cost-effective solution for customers that require massive scale cloud deployments where cost is a more important factor than a bunch of features. This is basically a no-frills workhorse with a throughput of up to 1.44 terabits per second and a switching capacity of just over 1 billion packets per second. It's pretty amazing what you can do with open source projects. Alright, and finally we have the security devices. When we're talking about security with regards to Juniper, we are usually talking about the SRX platform. That's right. The SRX line of products are not considered routers, and they're not really considered firewalls either. They are classified by Juniper as services gateways, mainly because the SRX is such a versatile and powerful platform. But for clarity purposes, we're just going to call them firewalls for now. The SRX line of products offer high-performance security with advanced integrated threat intelligence, and it's delivered on what Juniper calls the industry's most scalable and resilient platform. Some of the features the SRX line boasts are 100 gigabit Ethernet interfaces and features like express path technology, which can enable up to 2 terabits per second of performance. The SRX line is really a pretty large line. You have small branch office devices like the SRX 100 and the SRX 210, all the way up to the SRX 5800 powerhouse with a fully modular chassis system and 9 different models in between to pretty much fit any environment. These are very popular Juniper devices, and you are likely to deal with these devices quite a bit if you spend much time working with Juniper equipment. This platform is discussed in greater detail in a later course. But also note that the Juniper security certification track is also based around the SRX platform. So basically, if you're planning on taking the next level certification after this Junos certification, the JNCIA-SEC or security track, that course and that learning track and that certification are all based and centered around the SRX platform. So just keep that in mind. The VSRX is also available. You guessed it, that is a virtual SRX. You can get an SRX virtual machine, and they're usually used in larger enterprise and service provider environments. Okay, so let's recap for a minute. We talked a little bit about the modularity of the Junos OS architecture, and we discussed the differences between old Juniper products and the new stuff. The difference between Screen OS and Junos OS and how to tell them apart. Remember, we are learning Junos, not Screen OS, so stay away from things like ISGs and SSGs, things like that. Look more at SRX and EX switches if you're going to purchase something for lab equipment. Then we talked about all of the major Juniper product lines currently offered. We talked about some of the major routing platforms, Juniper's latest switching technology, and the versatile SRX security platform. So now you should have a pretty good idea of what products Juniper is making and where they stand in the market with some of these technologies.